well. How does it feel to be done with Unit 1? Okay, moving on to Unit 2. So we are going to talk about the biological diversity of this crazy Earth that we live on. So we're going to start off, and I'm going to break this into a couple of different parts so I don't overwhelm you once again. All right, so what we are putting behind us. We covered last time 4.5 billion years in the last unit, okay? How does that feel? We covered in like 1 week 4.5 billion years. So kind of crazy to think of all that's happened on this Earth previous to since we've been here, basically. So in light of that, let's look at a lovely video, one of my favorites. I'm sure some of you guys have seen it, reminding us of some of the creatures that unfortunately we missed out on seeing, like unicorns and leopleurodons. So watch this and laugh and enjoy.
Hey, Charlie! Hey, Charlie, wake up! Yeah, Charlie, you silly sleepyhead, wake up!
Oh God, you guys. This had better be pretty freaking important. Is the meadow on fire?
No, Charlie, we found a map to Candy Mountain. Candy Mountain, Charlie. Yeah, Charlie, we're going to Candy Mountain. Come with us, Charlie. Yeah, Charlie, it'll be an adventure. We're going on an adventure, Charlie.
Yeah, Candy Mountain, right. I'm just gonna, go back to sleep now.
No, Charlie, you have to come with us to Candy Mountain. Yeah, Charlie, Candy Mountain. It's a land of sweets and joy. Join us.
Please stop bouncing on me.
Candy Mountain, Charlie. Yeah, Candy Mountain.
All right, fine. I'll go with you to Candy Mountain.
La 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 la.
Enough with the singing already.
Our first stop is over there, Charlie.
Oh God, what is that?
It's a leopleurodon, Charlie. A magical leopleurodon. It's gonna guide our way to Candy Mountain.
All right, guys, you do know that there's no actual Candy Mountain, right?
Shun the non-believer. Shun. Shun.
Yeah.
It has spoken. It has told us the way.
It didn't say anything.
It's just over this bridge, Charlie. This magical bridge of hope and wonder.
Is anyone else getting, covered in splinters? Seriously, guys, we shouldn't be on this thing.
Charlie! 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 Charlie!
I'm right here. What do you want?
We're on a bridge, Charlie. We're here.
Well, what do you know? There actually is a Candy Mountain.
Candy Mountain, Candy Mountain. You fill me with sweet, sugary goodness. Go inside the Candy Mountain cave, Charlie. Yeah, Charlie. Go inside the cave. Magical wonders are to behold when you enter.
Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I'm gonna stay out here.
But you have to enter the Candy Mountain Candy Cave.
Okay, I'll stop it there. Most of you guys that have seen that, it gets a little crazy about after that, and his kidney gets stolen in Candy Mountain. Yeah, we don't need to see that part. No, I love that. It cracks me up. I don't know. I've got a weird sense of humor. What can I say? So, nonetheless, by the way, being a biology teacher, dare I say I didn't really know that a leopleurodon actually existed. Yeah, it did. I looked it up. Okay, on to Unit 2, biological diversity. We're going to talk about all of these lovely different things here that you see. Plantae, Animalia, fungi, protista, eubacteria, archaebacteria, and you're going to cover a lot of different species on this Earth. Okay, so be prepared. There's so much information. Again, in these mini sessions, I like to cover kind of the general things, really cover what you might see on your exam, but be able to take this information, go back to your reading, and understand some of the details that are described there. Okay? All right, in this mini lesson, we will cover taxonomy and prokaryotes, but I might break it up depending on how long I talk. I seem to just run my mouth forever. So, no, I do not have a t-shirt like this, but maybe someday. Love prokaryotes, the most dominant life form on Earth. No, hopefully I won't wear that, but we will go over some of this stuff. You'll see that. So let's start off with classification. Yeah! So what is classification? Well, classification is the arrangement of organisms into orderly groups based on their similarities. It helps us to figure out what is what, and kind of keep them straight. When you think about how many organisms actually are in existence and have been in existence since the earth began, it's so overwhelming we have to figure out a way to organize it. So classification is also known as taxonomy. So then you're like, okay, classification, taxonomy, I've heard them, but I'm not really sure, are they really the same things? And yes, taxonomy is the branch of biology concerned with the grouping and naming of organisms. So it is the same thing, although taxonomy can sometimes encompass different things that classification does. So taxonomy is a little bit more specific. We take that part of biology and we really focus on naming and grouping different organisms together. Okay? The benefits of classifying: accurately and uniformly names organisms, prevents misnomers such as starfish and jellyfish. Those aren't really fish. So it's kind of funny, even though I still call sometimes those jellyfish, jellyfish, and starfish, starfish, those aren't fish. So they actually have true names that really don't have anything to do with fish, okay? Same with seahorse, okay? It's not really a horse, right? And yes, it does live in the sea, but nonetheless. We also use the same language for all classification. Usually it's Latin and Greek for all the different names, which is nice. And same in the medical field, you'll notice that a lot of those medical terminology come from Greek and Latin, which is good because then it's just uniform across the board. So why classify? Well, it helps us study the earth. And I say, duh. I found this funny picture. I thought, it's kind of funny. There's one in every crowd. See the one? Yep, that's her. She's like, I'm going the right direction. No, but really, I want you guys to think about studying the earth is a huge, huge undertaking. So we need to classify in order to simplify things. Also, it helps us organize all the species we discover. Okay, so there's so many of them. And if we just kind of threw all of them in, one pile and said, yeah, these are some of the new organisms we've discovered, then they would basically get lost in everything because there's so many. So here's some fun facts, and I love this guy's face. He's like, say, what? There are 13 billion known species of organisms. That's a ton. 13 billion. That's only 5% of all organisms that ever live, though. Right? Because remember, there are so many organisms that we don't even know were in existence because of lack of fossil records so long ago, extinctions that wiped things out completely. So new organisms are still being found and identified as we speak, which is kind of cool to think about, okay? So we're still in the midst of finding new organisms. Wouldn't that be fun if you were like, yeah, I was like walking along the street and I found this new organism? Yeah, I mean, that's going to happen, but nonetheless, that is happening in certain places. So let's talk about the early taxonomists. You're going to see this in your lesson. You're going to basically learn a lot of the background of where a lot of this came from. So some of the early taxonomists were good old Aristotle, 2,000 years ago. Kind of a crazy looking guy. I know this is a statue and all, but still. He was the first taxonomist, okay? Aristotle divided organisms into plants and animals. Just very basic. Here's plants, here's animals. Kind of wish that we would have kept it that way, but there's no way that we could have fit everything to plants and animals. He then subdivided them by their habitat. Okay, so which plants live on land, which plants live in the sea, which of these animals are air dwellers, and so forth, okay? Another guy by the name of John Ray, he was a botanist, so basically studied plants. He was the first to use Latin for naming. His names were usually really, really long, complicated descriptions kind of telling us about the plant were in the name. So it's like, I can't even give you an example, but blah, 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 and it was all in Greek or Latin, mostly Latin, because he was the one that came up with more of the Latin, and they described the plant, but obviously we couldn't use those long names continually because now we have 13 billion species. Okay, so then a guy by the name of Carolus, how would you like that name? Carolus Linnaeus, okay? 1700s, he was the 18th century taxonomist. Classified organisms by their structure. So he got a little bit more specific now. He developed the naming system that's still used today. Right? Awesome. Woohoo! He's also called the father of taxonomy. Okay, developed the modern system that we know as binomial nomenclature. Binomial meaning two names, and that's how we've named. So our genus and species, the binomial nomenclature that we still use. Okay, so just like I talked about right here, the two-word name. We are Homo sapiens, okay? We cannot forget good old Robert Whittaker. He's obviously a lot more recent American ecologist. He basically came up with those 5 kingdoms of life: Plantae, Animalia, Fungi, Protista, and Monera. Although there's a lot of changes with the Monerans. So you're going to notice that in your lesson, we don't really talk about the Monera kingdom anymore. We talk about kind of, there's a kingdom in transition. So we'll get to that in a second. But so Robert Whittaker did basically come up with these 5 kingdoms, but now they're changing because, again, we're finding more species, we're finding more things that are kind of negating some of the things that were found early on in maybe the early 1900s and so forth, and really middle 1900s. So homologous structures, one of the big things, the basis for modern taxonomy. So we look at homologous structures, meaning same structure, different function. So here's a picture of a couple of things, like you have human, cheetah, whale, and bat. Notice that the homologous structures are all, in the same color, where we have basically the radius and the ulna, okay, and all of these different structures. Here's the humerus in green, and then you have the metacarpals and the phalanges, okay? So all of these look very similar in a way. They don't necessarily have the same exact form, but they do the same thing. They have kind of the same structure. So homologous structures, so bones in the forelimbs show similarities in mammals. So I want you guys to know that that is one of the basics for that modern taxonomy, is coming up with kind of similar structures. They may not look exactly alike, and obviously when you look at us as a whole, we don't look anything like a bat, right? But we still have some of those homologous structures. Another thing is similar embryo development. Again, we can look at us, pig, chicken, turtle, and a fish. And there are many similarities when you look at these embryos. So we all start at this as this fertilized egg, and look at the similarities. Kind of crazy that if you were to lay these embryos in front of me, I couldn't tell you which one is human. Maybe I could, but still. And until you get to adult phase, or should I say maybe even birth, because not adult phase, we don't look like a pig nor a baby. But before we are born, we are starting to basically change and look a little bit more like our, form once we're born. But embryos look very similar. Kind of interesting. Okay, and the last thing, molecular similarity in DNA, RNA, or amino acid sequence of proteins. So there's a lot of, I don't have a picture for that, but there's a lot of similarities in those sequence of proteins. And some more rules. Let's talk about rules. So, not that I want to tell you, you can't. These are all just things, though, that taxonomy has to go by. So first of all taxa must belong to a higher taxonic group. So when you put something into a group, it actually belongs to a larger group. It has to. It's got to fit somewhere into the bigger picture. Also, the first validity published name has priority. So just as it says, it's going to have priority if it was that first published name. All taxa also has an author. So you'll see that, and I think this is in your lesson, you'll see sometimes a letter after the genus and species, and that is the author. So you might see an L, that would be for Linnaeus. So it's going to have an author of who came up with that name. All right, on to systematics and phylogeny. So this is either pronounced phylogeny or phylogeny, and I love this word because it's kind of crazy, and it makes me think, just like this picture. I'm like, Every time I look at it, I'm like, how do I want to say it this time? All right, so the science of classifying things. That's what phylogeny is, okay? Deep, real deep. Phylogeny is the evolutionary history of a group of life forms. Now, this is stuff that I have to say, even as a biology teacher, I kind of look at and I'm still like, I don't know if I totally understand it. So don't feel bad if you look at some of these pictures coming up. They're called cladograms, that you're like, I'm not sure if I quite follow what they're trying to show here, okay? So think about, though, the definition of phylogeny, the evolutionary history of a group of life forms. So we go back into evolution a little bit. So Willie, good old Willie, he goes by Willie. No, Willie Hennig, he basically came up with the cladis. A cladis is a group of life forms and their single common ancestor. Now, what I don't want you to know, or what I don't want you to take from this, is that when I show you these cladograms that this guy kind of came up with, cladistics, it's not that for sure all of these things came from this one common ancestor. but there were similar kind of features in one common ancestor that gave rise to lots of different kind of species and organisms with that similarity. So it helps us to determine some of the evolutionary history of life forms, how things kind of micro-evolved over time. So here's a basic cladogram. Diagram showing how organisms are related based on shared or derived characteristics such as feathers, hair, or scales. So again, it's kind of still hard for me, even as a biology teacher, to look at this and completely understand where they're getting all this. But nonetheless, there are some shared characteristics among each of these: a lancelet, lamprey, grouper, salamander, turtle, and wolf, of all things, right? And you look here and it shows that from the lancelet to the lamprey, all of a sudden you have this vertebral column. From these two, you have jaw bones. From these two, four-legged locomotion. From these two, amniotic eggs. And from these two, hair. So again, I know it doesn't quite make sense, but what they're trying to get at when these cladograms, they're all shared characteristics and from this early ancestor all the way through to the wolf. And I'll show you another picture, okay? And then we'll take a break and we'll come back into another section. So here's a primate cladogram. So you have a ring-tailed lemur, spider monkey, rhesus monkey, chimpanzee, and a human. A little bit easier to kind of visualize as opposed to, say, a fish to a wolf, right? All right, so from here, right here, you have 4 kinds of teeth: movable head, front-facing eyes, large brain, omnivores, 5 digits on hand and foot with opposable thumbs. All right, so you know that obviously when you talk about ring-tailed lemur and a human, there are some things that obviously, you know, there are some similarities there. Then you go to the spider monkey. So not only does the spider monkey have all of these things, now there's central eye area for more acute vision. And then from the spider monkey to the rhesus monkey, now we have developed downward pointing nose. And then from the rhesus monkey to the chimp, the loss of the tail. From the chimp to the human, loss of opposable thumb on the foot. So interesting that, again, not saying that we came from ring-tailed lemurs. That's not what these are trying to say at all. But it's talking about the similarities among some of the characteristics that we have that have been shared throughout many different types of organisms. Okay? All right, so we're going to take a break there. There's part 1 for you. We'll be back with the next part.